My name is David Brown. I have a blog called The Trini Trodon where I talk a lot about paleontology and paleontology toys. Today I have generic Godzilla, and I'm going to be talking about Jurassic Park. Here's a vintage novel, actually from before the movie was out. While I'm at it, here's my Jurassic Park box set, which is supposed to be obsolete, but I've never replaced it. And what I have decided to talk about with this video is just what it was like being a fan of Jurassic Park when the book came out before the movie. Now, something people I think have forgotten or never noticed, the book went to screen very, very quickly. The book was published in 1989. From all indications, there was discussion of the movie rights even before the book was published or in wide circulation. So the book was a major hit. Then the movie came out in 1993. By then, I probably read this definitely multiple times, maybe 5 or even 5 to 10 times, and I've still come back to it since. Let's see if Godzilla can hold the book. Not really. Yes, this is a Godzilla toy from a company called Dorme that I grew up with, and this is the kind of thing that defines my experience with dinosaur pop culture. I had a whole bunch of dinosaur toys in the 1980s, early 90s. This ended up kind of dwarfing the others. And then I'll set him down for the moment. So going to the Jurassic Park book, what I remember is being very excited for the movie to come out. I certainly liked the movie when it came out, but it never was the same, or what I would have thought would be the way they do the book, and part of that would definitely be that they rated it PG-13, and that was one thing that definitely didn't reflect the book. If they'd done nearly what they'd shown in the book, it definitely would have led to an R-rated movie, or even at that time, it might have led to an unrated movie, and that's something I'll be getting to. And so reading the book, I definitely developed my own picture of the dinosaurs and also a picture of the characters that was pretty different from the movies, or the way it was finally shown in the movies. And as I was saying, I certainly wasn't disappointed by the movies. Well, not the first movie, The Lost World. That was another thing, but I could do that best as another video. So the thing with the book is that it is simply insane how much action gets packed in. I'm double checking this. The paperback book is 399 pages. There's a big chunk that's just setting up the story, like talking about the park and how they're supposed to have cloned the dinosaurs. I'm just looking through this. I'm up to page 150, and it hasn't really gotten into the major action. But once the action really starts, it is absolutely non-stop. Now, what's interested me most, especially seeing reactions to it to the movie from quite a bit later is that there's things people talk about, argue about with the movies that aren't even a big deal in the book. And the big thing with that, and a major difference with the characters, with Alan Grant, Dr. Sattler, them being romantically involved is absolutely not a thing, excuse me, in a book. In the book, it said Dr. Grant is a widow, Dr. Sattler's engaged to someone else. And even with the movie, this is where I kind of have my own headcanon. In the entire series, there's really only one point where it specifically said they're romantically involved, and it's what Dr. Grant tells to Ian Malcolm, after Dr. Malcolm has been trying to hit on her. So, to me, that always seemed like playing interference. For the rest, if I were to go just with what's shown on screen in the movies, even they maybe never know, and what you see later is that it kind of becomes moot. And another thing in the books is that Dr. Grant loves the kids, and it specifically said he loves kids because kids love dinosaurs, and that's really the reality if you're in paleontology. Even if you don't really like kids, you still have to deal with kids unless you're doing nothing but digging up dinosaur bones, which you can do, but it's a lot more typical to be in the museums. Even if you're just doing digs for stuff, you still need to connect with donors for the museum. And then again, there's really nothing said about whether Dr. Grant wants his own children, and that's where you might kind of harmonize the books with the movie. Like if you've spent your entire career having to alternate between the work and dealing with the museum donors, the museum visitors, sure, at a certain point you might just get burned out being with kids. And another thing is with the dinosaurs in the book. They are absolutely terrifying. And you can see that especially with the Dilophosaurus. That was really one of my favorite dinos, even before the movies or the book were out. Part of that, it was actually discovered in my state, in Arizona, the way up north and east in Arizona, pretty close to the same place as Petrified Forest. And in the books, the Dilophosaurus is the biggest dinosaur you see after, or the biggest theropod you see after the Tyrannosaurus. They're definitely bigger than the raptors, which was absolutely true of the real dinosaurs. And when they run into Nedry, which is absolutely what happens in the book, he is terrified of them even without really seeing them. And they do have the thing about them spitting venom, but there's nothing with that silly frill. You talk to any paleontologist, they hate the frill thing. And what really didn't work with that is that this is a creature that already has those big crests, so why would they have a second thing there? And also with the raptors, the book really plays pretty loose with the description. The way I think I always pictured them is that they would be about as tall as what ended up being shown in the movies, but I would have pictured them a lot leaner. And that is probably close to the real thing. Something that gets talked about now is that the movie showed them without feathers. The thing about that, back then even, we already knew pretty well that the raptors, the real Velociraptor Deinonychus, would have had feathers, but what was being discussed with the effects guys was that it was still difficult, if not beyond their capacity, to show CGI creatures with feathers or fur. So my educated guess has always been that they left out the feathers because they knew they couldn't do that with the CGI. And if you look at the stories about the movie, even whether there would be CGI was a pretty close thing. Now, the other thing that's the biggest difference between the movie and the book rather, in the movie they just about avoided showing any dinosaur being killed except by another dinosaur, and even then they were pretty loose with it. In the books, absolutely the dinosaurs die. Uh, and it's in very graphic, even outlandish ways. In the book, Robert Muldoon, who absolutely lives in the book, has this rocket launcher that he uses to blow up one of the velociraptors. Then they have more velociraptors that get killed when they're wounded, fighting each other, or poisoned. And then there's also a scene in the book where Dr. Grant takes on a velociraptor with nothing but a syringe, and Dr. Grant wins. And also with the book, there's the major theme of the people trying to get control of the park or thinking they're in control when they aren't. And in the book, that goes on a lot longer. It's done in 3 acts. First, Nedry turns off the fences and the Tyrannosaurus gets loose. Then Dr. Grant and the kids are trying to get to safety. Well, the guys are trying to turn the park back on. Then they turn everything on, but they do it the wrong way. And then that's when the entire park collapses and the velociraptors get loose. And in the books also, besides Dr. Grant, the kids, to some extent Malcolm, there aren't really characters with redeeming qualities. Dr. Wu, who does get killed in the book, just cares about the fame he's expecting to get from his research. Okay, Muldoon, he's the sympathetic one. Again, he does live in the book. And there's also a guy, he kind of got merged with Gennaro in the movie, named Regas. He's the Jurassic Park publicist. He at least comes across as sort of sympathetic, but then he gets eaten. Gennaro actually lives. He at least is conflicted. But then John Hammond in the novel is just pathological. And the funny thing is, people have long since said that what the book shows with DNA and cloning wouldn't work, at least not for dinosaurs. And that was really something else we knew back then. What we've looked into, to a certain extent, are still looking into, is cloning extinct mammals from what's still the recent past. Either one species that were actually exterminated recently, like some of the rhino species and subspecies, or at worst, stuff that was around in the Pleistocene that we killed off. And the funny thing is that even then we had really figured out there were 2 options. One was to try to find DNA, which, from what we know now, is a lot harder than they show in the book. The other is to try to reverse engineer creatures. Like if you want a woolly mammoth, you could put in a gene or even just inject some hormones on an elephant and make the elephant have more hair. And in theory, you could take a chicken and turn that into a velociraptor just by reactivating some of the repressed genes, if and when we can figure out how to do that. And what they show in the book is that John Hammond will absolutely lie about what he's actually doing. There's even a backstory given where he creates a miniature elephant that he uses to raise investment, and that actually would fit with the cloning or reverse engineering. There were dwarf elephants, well, relative dwarf elephants. They were still very large, like the size of a bear or a large pig. And he says that the elephant is the product of genetic engineering when he actually made it by a completely different way. And that actually kind of fits with the deconstruction of the book Science. What they show in the book would really, at that stage, have been science fantasy. Again, we now know there's ways we could do that sooner or later, but it wouldn't be that way, and maybe John Hammond already knew that, and he was doing something different. And in the book also, by now it's pretty well known, there's no redemption arc for John Hammond. He is already coming up with plans to rebuild the park or build a new park. Then he gets hurt, and the littlest dinosaurs, the procompsognathids, eat him. And I recognize when The Lost World came out, when they showed the guy eaten by those little green dinosaurs, that was originally what happens to John Hammond. Now, what I've thought about a lot more, especially since Jurassic World came out, is what we could really do with the Jurassic Park franchise as it is. And what I've wished for is really that they would do what happened with The Thing. Now, as I said in the video I did, The Thing, that is the 1980s The Thing, was originally going to be a remake of an older movie. What they actually did was redo an original adaptation of a story that the older movie had been based on. And by now, it's been about as much time since the book and the first movie came out as it had been between when the 1951 Thing was made and when the 1980s Thing was made. We might technically be 1 year short of the 30th anniversary of the movie, but we're getting up there. So what could actually work, and I really wish they had done this or something like it with Jurassic World, is just leave the original movies alone. Just go back to the drawing board and readapt the book and probably make it R-rated. Now, you might still get away with a PG-13 rating, but it would need to be a very edgy PG-13. At least show some of the stuff that actually happens to the dinosaurs in the book. And I think also what would really make the most sense is to have a lower budget than the original movie. Even do it as a TV movie. By now it would be something like probably a movie for Netflix or one of the other streaming platforms or cable channels, but still you could do something interesting with the material in that kind of budget and format. And if you did it that way, you could turn it in to something longer, so you don't have to pack the entire book into just about 2 hours. You could even expand it into an actual series, at least maybe 3 or 4 or 4 to 6 parts. Though I think at the other end of that, you're almost getting into things that are doing too much, and I would definitely count Westworld. And that was actually another rant I didn't get to. Jurassic Park is absolutely Westworld. It's just with the dinosaurs instead of the robots. And that really covers what I had wanted to say about the book and the movies. This is Godzilla again. I might feature him in the blog if there's in the videos rather, if there's more positive feedback. For now then, I'll sign out. If you want a recommendation, you could definitely watch the original movie, even watch the third movie, and I definitely recommend reading the book if you haven't already, because it is absolutely its own thing. So I'm signing out. As I always say, watch, read something good.